Many years ago, I had a bad meth addiction. Everything in my life revolved around getting my next bump. Most of the negative physical side effects were gradual, such as back problems from sitting in the same position for 6 hours at a time, palpitations, or skin problems from constant picking. This report is about a much worse effect. Many addicts have to hit rock bottom before they resolve to kick. Rock bottom is a term for an injury or experience that serves as a wake-up call. This is my rock bottom experience. About 2.5 years into my meth use, I got a contaminated batch. My primary mode of use was snorting, and there were many regular health issues that came up because of that. I had frequent sinus infections, sudden heavy nosebleeds, and I can't even count how many times I ruptured my conjunctiva, the clear tissue that covers the eye, from rubbing itchy, swollen eyes. But this time it was different. I'd been up for about a day and a half by the time the discomfort became intense. I got a mirror and looked closely at my eyes. I'm very twitchy about eye problems in general, and what I saw absolutely horrified me. Not only were both my conjunctiva ruptured, but the entire eyes were swollen. The whites of my eyes had broken up into tiny little chunky bits that were suspended in pink fluid. I was sure I was hallucinating at first, but when I asked my friend to look at it, he told me to go to the hospital. I sat in the waiting area of the county emergency room for several hours in line to be treated. I went into the bathroom several times to do more little doses. I finally got to see a doctor who put ointment into my eyes and dyed them with orange stuff. He wanted me to go back into the waiting room for a few minutes to let the dye develop before examining me again. While I was waiting, I went right back into the bathroom to do more. That was when I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked shocking. My eyes were bright orange and clotted with ointment. It looked like a really good special effects makeup job, except it was my real face. Seeing myself in this condition, completely out of control and unable to stop doing more, I realized that I had to quit or I was going to kill myself. It turned out I hadn't been hallucinating what I saw in the mirror. The whites of my eyes had curdled, for lack of a better word. The doctor's test showed me that the speed I'd been doing more and more was contaminated with Staphylococcus epidermis. Having a staph infection in your eyes is not only unspeakably uncomfortable, it's repulsive. There is a relatively happy ending to this story. My eyes didn't sustain any permanent damage, and I finally did get clean. It's almost been 9 years since I last got high, and it will never happen again. Most of my friends survived meth, but they also have lingering health problems years after they quit. Many are caught in a cycle of relapse. Some are dead. The high was great, but it was not worth the price that I paid. Up until this event, I was a coke addict. My usual dealer wasn't answering his phone, so I called a new guy who said he was out of cocaine and offered me and my girlfriend some crystal meth. Of course, we were simply dying to get high, and although I thought about it and it was somewhat uncomfortable trying something new, I agreed when he told us he'd give us the first gram for free, and even told us how much to use, according to how much cocaine we normally would sniff over 2 to 3 days, to cut it down by 75% because he said the stuff was much stronger. Well, we didn't listen. About 2 hours after he gave us the first gram, we called for more. This stuff was intense. I felt great, kinda like when I did lines of cocaine, but so much better. I didn't get my usual restless feeling where I couldn't stand a song for more than 30 seconds, or the paranoid feeling where I thought every car behind me was a cop car. I'd been doing coke much too long and too often, and my good buzzes were long gone. I felt absolutely amazing, full of energy, happy. Every song on the radio was my favorite, and my girlfriend and I just wanted to drive around talking and laughing, bouncing around to our favorite song. And when cocaine would usually entrap us in my car for 3 days in a row, without wanting to face anyone, we already knew this drug was a party drug and actually wanted to stop people on the street to talk or go for a drive with us. This stuff was good, so we got 3 more grams, despite the dealer telling us that was way too much for 2 people, and called it the start of the weekend. I was really high on this stuff and don't remember too much, but I do remember going back to my old apartment, which I had moved out of that same month, and only had 2 weeks left there, so the electricity was cut off and there was no furniture left. But in order to escape my live-in boyfriend and his questions, we settled in with candles and a mini portable radio. We called around and invited 2 guys over to party for the first night, drove around all day and night the following day, just the 2 of us. We didn't leave the car much. We were just so damn happy and in the moment. We finally decided to go back in my apartment when my eyes were bugging out of me and I couldn't see the streetlights and stuff properly. Stupid, I know. That night, the second night, started feeling paranoid. I spent all night looking out the window thinking every car or footstep was someone after us. I then started feeling anxious and had some difficulty breathing, but nevertheless, we kept going. By morning, I was completely stoned, beyond recognition. We retired to the floor, laying there talking when I noticed my breathing was getting crazy. I couldn't take deep breaths. My shoulders started to throb and my arms felt numb. But I didn't want to freak my girlfriend out, so instead of saying anything, I asked her to go for a walk with me. The entire time, I had shooting pains in my arms and shoulders. My lungs hurt every time I took a breath, and my throat felt like it was closing in on me. I was freaked out. I confessed to her that I wasn't feeling right and needed to go home. We drove back to my place, and I told my boyfriend about what I did and how I felt. He told me to have a shower and lay down, so I did. The entire time, my body was feeling really odd. Everything felt numb and tingly, and I couldn't explain it, but I thought something was seriously wrong. When I was in the shower, I noticed that my knees were looking a bit blue, but since my vision was so altered, I ignored it. Big mistake. My boyfriend helped me into bed, and I laid there alone for about 5 minutes while he talked to my girlfriend about how much I did, because at this point, I was convinced I was overdosing. While I was laying there, I got a sharp pain from the tip of my middle finger up to my elbow in my right arm. It was the strangest feeling ever. I was crying and scared, so I called my boyfriend to the room. By then, my arm was turning white and tingled. My fingers were wrinkly and also very white, so I told him I needed to go to the hospital. On the way there, my arms and legs got really numb. I kept trying to shake it off to get my circulation going, but it wouldn't work. About 5 minutes into the drive, my hand turned blue. It was the freakiest thing I ever saw, and it only lasted about 30 seconds, but my boyfriend also saw it and started to panic. I told him I was dying, that I knew it, and I was sorry. I started telling him my final wishes as both my arms and hands were now completely blue. This was it. I was dying. So many things crossed through my mind. Not only was I high as a frickin' kite, but I was gonna die before I made it to the hospital. All I remember after that was everyone yelling in the emergency room, yelling at the nurse to hurry up, that I was overdosing and needed immediate help. Everyone was looking at me funny, and someone asked me what was happening to me. I told them I had no circulation in my body anymore. I was crying. They immediately stripped me down and put heating blankets all over me because my body was freezing. I was hooked up to a bunch of monitors and had about 10 nurses and doctors around me. I remember at one point there were 3 doctors discussing my situation, and one of them called another hospital. He was saying he had never seen anything like this, and asked what he should use as a poison control or something like that. Then I heard him say, "You think she needs a bypass?" and hung up and left the room with other doctors. They returned what felt like hours later to say they had given me something, can't remember what or why, and would wait to see if it worked before attempting to open me up. I was convinced I was dying. All I could hear was monitors and people talking loudly. I kept asking the nurse if I was gonna die, and she had tears in her eyes. All she would say is, "I don't know." She looked at my heartbeat on the screen and rushed to talk to a doctor. I was told my heartbeat was very irregular and my blood pressure was not looking too good. I can't remember the exact words to say anything, but my boyfriend told me some stuff later too. My entire body was still blue and freezing, and no matter how many blankets or heat they applied, it wasn't working. I was told my system was shutting down, but my heart was beating. What that means, I still don't know. A doctor told me I can lose my limbs, all of them, if my circulation didn't start back up. I spent the next few hours, minutes, praying to be given another chance and that I would never touch drugs again. I was given something to make me pass out or relax me, and was wheeled into intensive care. All I remember after this was having my blood taken once because it hurt like hell. I later found a bruise the size of my arm there. I was in intensive care for 3 days, highly drugged up with my boyfriend at my side at every single waking moment. He later confessed to me that he didn't think I would make it. After all, the doctors told him it wasn't looking too good. I can't imagine what he had to go through because of me. I still don't know for sure what happened to me because when I was released, I was still drugged up and couldn't ask any questions, and I don't remember any of the doctors that took care of me. I choose to forget it all. It has been 1 year and a few days since this episode, and I am now engaged to my boyfriend and have a newborn baby. Needless to say, I never touched drugs after this event, and don't plan on it. For any of you who believe crank is such a wonderful thing, please read my story. I too thought it was pretty cool, until... It seemed as though it was one of the best nights of my life. I was tweaking really hard, having so much fun with my friends. Then morning came and everyone was leaving and I was left home alone. By this time, I wasn't feeling all that well. I felt lethargic. I couldn't do anything, just lay there. Finally, I thought I would get up and do something, and maybe I would get everything out of my system. I couldn't have been more wrong. It became harder and harder to breathe. I began praying to God. Please don't let me die. All I could think was that they weren't going to have their mommy anymore. I knew how much I would miss them and how much they would miss me. I was too scared to call for help, and I thought I was just tweaking too hard, and that this all was in my imagination. It wasn't. It was too real, which became apparent when I realized my legs were turning purple. Gasping for air, I thought my heart was no longer beating. So I began to beat on my chest until I felt my heart beating again. I went through this routine for quite some time. Finally, my brother came to my house. Gasping for air, I told him I was going to die and to tell everyone that I loved them. He then called 911 and an ambulance arrived in what seemed like an hour. The first thing I said to them was, I need oxygen now. I believed that the last breath I got before the ambulance arrived was my last breath. The paramedics got me to the ambulance, and on the way to the hospital, they asked what had happened. I was honest with them. I needed their help. Though it was nice getting some air, I still felt like I wasn't getting enough. At this point, I told the paramedics I felt like I could pass out. That must have been a bad sign because they sped up. When I finally made it to the hospital, they made me take potassium pills and also put me on potassium and saline IVs. I remember looking at the heart monitor and my pulse was 180, over double what it should be. They had to take x-rays to see if and how much my heart was damaged. They also did several EKGs. I was first told that at any time my heart could go into abnormal palpitations and I would just die and I wouldn't be able to be saved. I was in the hospital for 3 long days. I went in on Christmas Eve night and didn't get out until the day after Christmas. My children came to visit me in the hospital on Christmas Day, but it was a bad Christmas for all of us. I wasn't supposed to be getting upset because it made my heart rate increase, but my daughter began to cry and I felt like the worst parent ever. So, needless to say, they didn't get to stay that long. Finally, the doctor decided I was stable enough to go home, but first, one last EKG, which was good news. My heart palpitations were normal and my heart was not damaged. Very good news. I got to go home. I later found out how serious my condition was. The doctor told my parents that I had 1 foot in the grave when I got there and that I am very lucky to be alive. It's almost been 4 months since my incident and I haven't yet recovered. I am still suffering from my mistake. I now have severe anxiety which disrupts my whole life, anxiety attacks quite frequently, and a constant uneasiness. Thoughts that I can't breathe or that my heart is not beating normally. If you honestly think that this won't happen to you, you may be sadly mistaken. I don't care how careful you are, it can still happen to you. I have learned a lot of things through all of this, but the main thing is that my life is more important to me than that shit is, and I am not willing to leave this world, my family, for something so stupid.